Alrighty, let's get into some combo. It's been a week and a bit. Sunday, January 15th, 2023. Norm, along with Mike, the Leafs coming off a 4-3 loss in Boston. Matt Grizzlick breaking Leafs Nation hearts across the country and around the world at 1844 of the third, making it 4-3. The Leafs just could not get it done. Mike, to me, the Leafs and Boston are very, very close in terms of talent and caliber. But Boston again shows that it's just a notch above. There's just an intensity that the Bruins play with that the Leafs can try to match, but just can't.
Good morning, Norm. I think it's more than that. I think last night, clearly the Bruins have been the best team in this league. They lost a game in regulation on Thursday to Seattle, and that was the first loss in regulation at TD Garden. So they've been fantastic. They're going to, if they don't trip over themselves, they're going to win the President's Trophy. That doesn't really mean anything because Florida won the President's Trophy and they lost in the second round last year. But this is a veteran team with a lot of good players who I think, haunt Maple Leaf fans' dreams. Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak, they're just good. I think this was an opportunity for the Leafs to prove that they are at their level. Now, the Leafs have had a fantastic season, but Boston is now, I think, 11 points ahead of them. So it was, the Leafs are not catching the Bruins, but in their mind's eye, this is something where, okay, let's see if we can match up with the Bruins, go into their house and beat them. And what happened? The Leafs were undone by what has undid them, if that's a word, in playoffs over the last few years. Stupid, bad giveaways. Now, I thought Matt Murray was good. He wasn't great, but he was good. I think he made a number of good saves, but the goal from Grizzlick with less than 2 minutes left to go, I think was stoppable. But the thing that killed the Leafs was in the micro was giveaways. The Riley Timmins pairing were on the ice for the first three goals. Timmins gave it up on the second goal, which ended up in a Pasternak goal. Riley with a bad pass on the first goal in the first period that resulted in the Bergeron goal. So that pairing didn't work. And Riley, we'll talk about Riley in a minute. He has struggled since coming back from his knee injury. But in the third period, John Tavares, late in the game, when you're trying to preserve a point with a giveaway in his own zone that resulted in Boston possessing the puck, getting it around and getting it to Grizzlick. Those are losses that are unforgivable because at least you get a point out of that game. But
he's a veteran who should settle it down amid the chaos, and he was not able to do that in that circumstance. And if the Boston comes away with a regulation win, the Leafs could have used that point just to sustain. You'd expect more from John Tavares in that moment. Johnny here says, and we'll get into the comments as we go through, this is the Convo. Norm along with Mike, thanks for being here. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. Johnny, this game was a copy of every game they have played in Boston during the playoffs. In a way, yeah, the result was the same.
Well, they've won games in Boston during the playoffs. The problem is that they don't win games in Toronto during the playoffs against teams like Boston and Tampa. And I'm gonna, for the purpose of the discussion during this show, I'm gonna lump Boston and Tampa together because those two teams, the Leafs have played 3 times during this recent 6 consecutive first round losses, and they're going to play them 4 times because they're playing Tampa in the first round of the playoffs. And if you look at both Boston and Tampa, the constructions of those teams are pretty similar. You have, veteran, experienced guys who have won Stanley Cups. You have deep lineups. You have contributors throughout the lineup. You're talking about third, fourth line guys who score, like AJ Greer scored last night. You have deep defenses, and you have quality goaltending. And with the Leafs, I think they have quality goaltending better than they've had over the last few years with Murray and Samsonov and over Jack Campbell. Last night, I'll say this: they missed TJ Brody. they need TJ Brody, 100% TJ Brody in this lineup, whether it's playing with Riley or whether it's playing with Justin Hall to make Justin Hall less of a liability. They need the depth. Giordano played really well. I can't complain about what Hall did last night. It was mostly Riley and Timmins. Timmins, he is what he is. I think he's a good offensive defenseman. Defensively, I think he's not fully formed yet. So, in a playoff scenario, will he be in the lineup? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. But their defense is deep enough, but one injury makes them maybe not on the level of either one of those potential potential opponents, and Morgan Riley has to be at the level that Morgan Riley can be. And right now, I think he came back from that injury. Maybe he's 100%. Maybe he feels tentative with the knee injury. Maybe it's going to take him a little while to get back to where he was. But he's clearly not as mobile as he was before the knee injury, and I think that's a factor. But overall, Norm, the problem is that the Leafs are almost wholly dependent on the top two lines to score. They got nothing out of their fourth line other than useless fights and empty calorie hits out of Dryden Hunt. And the third line was,
why else would Simmons and Hunt be in the lineup, Mike? You're not expecting Hunt to light up the lamp, and Simmons was there to set a tone with Nick Foligno and just to say that, hey, I'm here. Now, he wasn't there for the last part of the game because he was, in the sin bin for what was going on in between periods. But I understand what the guys were trying to accomplish here is that, look, we don't have a lot of might, but we're going to come to the table with what we have. And initially it seemed to, there were a lot of people applauding what Wayne Simmons did to try to be out there to set a tone. What else would you be expecting from a team that doesn't have the might and doesn't play with the ferocity that you wish it would, and it probably needs to take that next step?
Well, according to the reports before the game, Pontus Holmberg and Bobby McMahon were ill, so they couldn't play. So really, they had no option other than playing Simmons and Hunt. And maybe Hunt was going to play because he's a sort of a crasher and a banger on the fourth line. And Hunt played. He only played 8 minutes and 21 seconds last night. But Wayne Simmons, I'm sorry, I've made the point before, and I'm not casting aspersions on Wayne Simmons. He's had a fine career, and he's a good guy, and he's well liked in the locker room, but he can't keep up with the pace of the game. And he's taken stupid penalties in most of the games. Now, last night he got into a fight, which I don't know. Did it set the tone? Whatever. I don't know. I don't. But in between the second,
this is the Leafs pushback. Mike, sorry to interrupt you, but this is what the Leafs can do to push back. This is the way they're constructed. They do not have pushback from top to bottom throughout this lineup. So they bring in the guy.
That's why it's useless, Norm, because honestly, a fourth line guy like Wayne Simmons going out there for 4 minutes and 49 seconds and fighting is absolutely useless. Who's impactful in terms of being physical and providing pushback? A guy like Tom Wilson, who plays in a top 9, top 6 role for Washington.
And you're not saying this isn't an about face. You're not saying the Leafs don't require toughness.
They require toughness that plays. That's the thing. Okay, I'm talking about, you have a guy like Kyle Clifford who plays in the playoff game against Tampa, and he takes a dumb penalty and gets suspended. And he wasn't playing that many minutes. He's playing fourth line minutes, and it's like, put him out there for 6 minutes. That doesn't do shit. It really doesn't. You need a guy who can play in your top 6 or top 9, who can play physically, who's going to be out there, who isn't a liability. And Wayne Simmons, because of his lack of speed, is a liability. Now, last night, okay, he goes out, and after the whistle, when AJ Greer and Trent Frederick was mouthing off at Michael Bunting, who was like the only guy in the top 9 who pisses people off and gets the blood flowing, Wayne Simmons was mouthing off at AJ Greer, and they both got misconducts. Okay, great. Anybody can mouth off, but Wayne Simmons carries some gravitas because he plays physical. He's played physical in his career. That's fine. But what I'm saying is, this team, what they need is a player or players
Yeah.
that can play in the top nine, that can play physically, that can crash and bang. They don't have that on the roster. And all you saw last night were guys pushing around, well, okay, against Detroit. Jake Wallman cross checks John Tavares behind the Toronto net or behind the Detroit net. Was there a response? Nothing. That's your team captain.
Did you expect a response, Mike? The
You
team
have
needs
to have one.
okay. The team needs to be renovated with some players to supplant some of the guys we all are hoping, wishing, dreaming turn into adequate NHLers. That needs to happen. But in this moment, January 15th, leading into a trade deadline, leading into another season where we're still expecting the Leafs to do something better than they have in the past, that is a big ask, and that is a tall task. I mean, I'm all of a sudden Dr. Seuss, but Mike, uh, to find a group of guys to come in and replace who you have is next to impossible right now.
Mhm.
What I'd be asking the players is to just come to the table themselves. Again, it's the little engine that could in terms of guys who don't normally play like they're taller than they are, bigger than they actually are. But to do that anyway, that's as good as it's really going to get. I mean, you could bring one dude in to try to stir the drink a little bit, but again, Michael Bunting's doing his thing. You bring in another player who has a more of a physical prowess on the ice. But what the hell is that going to do to the philosophy on the team? How does that how does that affect everybody? It's possible it can, but I think it starts from within. You play with what you've got, and you try to modify your thinking to stand up to these teams like the Bruins and play with heart, play with hustle, play with the intensity, because that's what they've got. I just don't see how the modifications can take place in this moment that are going to immediately take this team from something that is close to something that'll get over the edge.
I think sandpaper and physicality are infectious. I'm not to say that I think all of a sudden Austin Matthews is going to start running people, but I
Well,
do.
he has some hits last night. He laid some body on guys. Like, I mean, he does what he can, and he's injured too, right?
But
That's what
I do think that if you bring in the right player, that it'll get other players to play like in a like manner. So it's like if you bring in somebody who can play in the top nine and can play physically, like say they go out and they trade for Ivan Barbashev from St. Louis, who's a physical forward, who's probably a third line center, which allows them to move either David Kampf down to fourth line or gives them some flexibility. If they do that, this is a crash and bang guy, and the other players will sort of follow suit. Now, I'm not saying all of a sudden they're going to become like a ridiculous physical team. They're just not built that way. But you need one or two players to provide that. And if all of a sudden Brad Marchand or Charlie Coyle or Trent Frederick run somebody, you need somebody to run that player, to run somebody. And I'm not saying illegally. I'm saying you need somebody to respond. If your reaction to a Boston player running a Toronto player is to put Wayne Simmons out there for 4 minutes, that's not an answer.
That's all Sheldon Keefe has. You're not going to get.
That's all he has right now.
You're not getting pushback from Nylander. You're not getting pushback from Engvall. You're not getting pushback from Marner. You talk about empty calories. You'll probably get that from Kerfoot, but not to the extent that you'd really need it from. You'd need it. So, yeah, maybe somebody comes in and lights a fire under their asses. I just don't. I mean, I believe the team conceptually was put together to dance around everybody, just to be skilled, more skilled, outscore everybody. You let in some bad goals, but for the most part, you'll score plenty more than you give up. And the rest of the league would fall into place. I believe that's what Kyle Dubas and his group that's how they laid their plan out years and years ago. And unfortunately, it's just not working on their behalf. They're close, but it's the element that they've all been fucking scared of, and a lot of their supporters have just disregarded as being passe in this game, that is required now to make this team a full success. Case in point, their fucking opponents in Boston last night play that way, and they are better than the Maple Leafs. Don't kid yourselves. They are better than the Maple Leafs. And until further notice, the Lightning are better than the Maple Leafs because of the way they play. And if the Leafs cannot think that teams are going to regress to their level so the Leafs can have full passage to cruise through because they are the divine right holders of a fucking Stanley Cup that they haven't earned yet, they're going to have to take that step. Do we have enough time to see it take place between now, the trade deadline, and the trade deadline to the playoffs, and the playoffs into the great unknown? I don't think so. Mike, I just want to get to some comments because there are a few people here who've been copy and pasting their comments. Mike Rushton, Mike, I read you and I see you, brother. Here you are. Braden Shen, Mike, tough and can play. Mike made the point that they should grab both Shen brothers and install them in the lineup, and those guys might be the catalyst to get the Leafs going.
Well, I mean, first of all, you would have to say St. Louis would have to want to trade Braden Shen, and Braden Shen is under contract for 5 more years at $6.5 million. So I don't think the Leafs would want to take on somebody with that kind of contract. But you'd have to say St. Louis probably wouldn't want to trade him. He's one of their better forwards. Elliot Friedman reported last night about Luke Shen. Well, guess who's interested in him? The Tampa Bay Lightning, which is because he won 2 Stanley Cups with them. They know him well, and I think he's making like under $1 million, so they can afford him. So yeah, and that fits in. Okay, again, add to Nick Paul and Patrick Maroon and Corey Perry and Brandon Hagel and Alex Cologne. Keep going on and on.
Wow.
And their 4th line might be better than the Leafs' 3rd line because it's got a guy who won a Hart Trophy on it. So, Hart Trophy. He did.
Yeah, he did years and years ago. Masarakis, Leafs control parts of the game. They could have won if it wasn't for the giveaways. Sure, but by the skin of their fucking teeth, right? They just don't take it. They don't take it to the opposition. Sure, they can beat the teams that are afraid of their own shadow. If it's just pawn hockey, the Leafs are going to win all the time. But we're talking about getting to the next level against teams that have won in the past and that have been a nightmare for the Leafs to try to compete with when it's an elimination circumstance. And that's what it's about, guys. That's what it's about.
The Leafs play last night was sort of like a heartbeat where there were peaks and there were valleys, and I think it was an inconsistent performance. Whereas Boston is flatline. They're the same almost all the time. Now, the thing is, if you can maintain your peaks, then you can beat them. But the Leafs didn't. There were lulls, and in those lulls, a team with the Bergerons and the Marchands and the Pasternaks and Taylor Hall and Krejci. I mean, their lineup is deeper and more talented and more physical and more experienced. And the only way the Leafs can compete with that is to have their high-level players playing at that high level for a longer period of time than probably is, I think that you can really realistically expect. So, I mean, unless like all of a sudden in the playoffs, Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner takes this team on their back and performs at a superhuman level. No. I look at the Leafs, even though they're a great team with the current construct of the playoff format, I just don't see a way that they can beat Tampa or they can beat Boston. So I hope I'm proved wrong. I hope for Leaf fans that I'm proved wrong.
Right.
But like at the deadline, if you ask me to bet on what Kyle Dubas is going to do, I think he's going to double down on skill. I think he's going to add a top 6 forward who plays on the second line, replacing Yarncroke so they can move him down to the third line. And it would be a Timo Meier or a Max Domi or a James Van Riemsdyk or somebody who can play with skill, and that sort of lengthens their lineup. But I think they need somebody who can play the fourth line. If they're not going to play somebody who's played with the Marlies and give them an opportunity, I think they need to add somebody that provides a little veteran depth on the fourth line. And if they get that, then maybe that improves their chances.
Okay. This is the Convo, Norm with Mike. subscribe to the channel. We'd appreciate it. Tons of listeners, not as many subscriptions as we'd like. Go ahead and do it. Like the content. 09 Max doing his best to troll us, wants me to stop swearing. This isn't Sunday fucking school, Max. Like, I build this podcast, I could say what I want. If you don't like it, if you
And
want
Matt,
to cover your ears, go for it. But also, too, the
yeah,
Bruins are essentially a one-line team. Max, I got to
horse
give you credit.
crap.
You are the Michael Bunting of this show today. A one-line team, apparently.
You apparently haven't watched the Bruins because, excuse me, because okay, they have the perfection line.
He's awesome. He's stirred it up. Max has stirred it up.
They also have a guy who's won a Hart Trophy in Taylor Hall playing on a third line with Charlie Coyle, and they have Krejci with they have three good lines and a fourth line that produces. So what the hell are you talking about?
Hey, William Nylander posters all over Max's locker, fucking basement or whatever he's got. Anush Patel, how about Max Domi from the Hawks? Yeah, that's that Max might be something, but would Max be the right kind of guy? Could he elevate and bring leadership? We know he would bring a bit of sandpaper. He's got some offensive skill. He's been around a little bit, but is that the kind of guy who can elevate? Because he doesn't have the pedigree of the long playoff run with sustained success, and he wouldn't be able to infiltrate a semi-winning mentality and help to inflate it to a winning mentality.
Well, let me ask you, Norm, because I don't know about this, but you probably would, because Max and Marner played with London at the same time. Did they play on the same line together? Did they ever? I don't know. I mean, because if they did, then that deal would make some sense, because then you'd have Domi playing on the left wing with Tavares and Marner, and I think that now Domi.
So Domi was on his way. Domi was on his way out when Marner just got there.
Right, but then he came back, and then he was playing with them in 2015, I think, when Marner was.
Well, Domi didn't want to be there at that point. Marner was just getting going. So they're all part of the lineage of that glut of talent that the Knights would draft and churn out as the seasons went on. So they were connected. They did share the same locker room and were on the same ice, but one was at the back end of a career in junior hockey, who didn't want to be there anymore. And then we all knew that the mullet wearing Mitch Marner would become a phenomenal player, and obviously 2016 helped lead the team to a Memorial Cup in Red Deer.
And he played with Matthew Tkachuk and Christian Dvorak.
That team was filthy, and that was the last Memorial Cup winner for the London Knights. So there's another one here. Corey Parrish. I'm scrapping that game as a one-off. Wow. Corey's an OG. He thinks that the Leafs should concentrate on improving the defense. I don't know how that was a one-off. They made their mistakes in big moments, which is not rare. I mean, it does happen, and in this case, it resulted in a loss in a very close game. But the result to Boston, in a close game that we all believed had substance, is not a rare thing. It's happened constantly. It's happened annually, and maybe it's indicative of what may happen if the Leafs and Boston face off in the playoffs again, which many of us believe they will.
Well, I'll ask Corey this, and because I was thinking about this last night. What game this season did that game most closely resemble? And I looked through the Leafs schedule, and it's the 4-3 overtime loss to Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay. Now, in that game, Matt Murray lets in a bad goal by Alex Killorn in overtime. But it was 3-3 late in the game. The Leafs barely held on to get the point, and then 30 seconds into overtime, Killorn scores the goal. And now I don't blame Murray for the Grizzly goal. There was a little bit of interference, he was saying that his glove was tipped, and they didn't. I'm surprised that Sheldon Keefe didn't go to the. That's my ringtone.
You got it this time.
No. But this is the thing. It's a situation where when you come up against the teams that you're going to face in the playoffs, it's a reflection of what you will see in the postseason. And you look at Tampa Bay, and you look at the depth of their lineup, and you look at how good they are on
Right.
defense, and you look at Vasilevsky, who's the best goaltender or the first or second best goaltender
Mhm.
in the league, especially in the playoffs. And you know what you have there. Linus Ullmark right now is the odds-on favorite to win the Vezina, and you've got a Bruins team that is deep and talented and on a roll. And I'm like, so I mean, in terms of okay, it might be a one-off, but those are the teams you're going to play. And Boston is going to add at the deadline too. There's talk about them being in on Ryan O'Reilly.
Right.
They can do that. There's talk, as I said with Friedman. There's talk about with Elliott reporting that that Tampa Bay is going to go out and get Luke Shen. How much do you want to bet with their limitations, with Tampa Bay's limitations? A guy like Andrei Kuzmenko, who was a Russian import from the KHL, who was on a 1-year contract, who's only making $950,000, who could be the next Panarin because he came in and he's almost averaging a point a game with Vancouver, but he's making less than $1 million and he's going to go unrestricted. How much you want to bet Tampa Bay is in on that guy because that's a guy that they can add and they can afford? Would Toronto be in on that guy? Maybe, but I'm just saying those are the moves that Tampa Bay will make because they're interested in winning another Stanley Cup. And the Leafs, I don't know what Kyle Dubas is going to do. And if Kyle Dubas doesn't get out of the first round, I'm convinced him and Sheldon Keefe are going to get fired.
Wow.
I mean, I wouldn't do it.
I'm not saying I disagree with that, but wow, after everything.
Yeah, after a 115-point season, the best season in Leaf history,
Wow.
And what they did last year, if they lose for a 6th straight time.
Right. Look,
Actually, 7th straight time. Maybe 7th straight time. Washington, Boston twice, Columbus, Montreal, Tampa. They lose for the 7th straight time. I don't think MLS and E is giving Kyle Dubas another contract. And if Kyle Dubas is gone, are they going to keep Sheldon Keefe around? I don't know. But that's what's in front of this team. And right now, they have to do something to get past these teams. And I don't know if there's enough. Do they have the cap space or do they have the wherewithal to do it? I don't know, but they have to try. Otherwise, it's another failed season for this team.
If the essence of the group was tough and frenetic and just in your face with the skill that it has, in a game like last night, and Max, we love you, man. We appreciate you being here. Max made the point that the Leafs had beaten the Bruins several times before losing last night. Just last night's game just had that feel of
playoffs.
The Leafs
playoffs,
not one step behind Boston, completely outshot. Blocking a bunch of shots, but not as many as Boston, and then I guess. Statistically hitting the Bruins, but a lot of that had to do with the Bruins being so suffocating and guys just making in a lot of ways incidental contact. I see a team that is very close but is missing that element of pushback and being forceful and running the play, having the whole of the play. And this Boston game, regardless of recent history, reminds you of past failures. And when you see that this team still lacks what it had lacked against the team that it'll most likely face, and that has been the kind of the litmus test, and to especially to lose late like that, even with the giveaways, even with the fuck ups and the brain farts and stuff like that, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. That said, there's a chance, Mike, and I know you wouldn't bet on this, but there's a chance something can go wrong in Beantown and the cards can start to drop and crumble, and I don't know if the whole house of cards would fall based on where they are right now. But it could happen. Morgan Riley could show up to next game and go, "I'm back, guys. Sorry, it's been a bit of a clusterfuck since I've returned, but I'm back." And he can get guys like Veets and some of these other dudes here. Veets, we love you, man. Some of these other dudes who are all over him right now, questioning the contract and believing that this guy's on the decline. So things might change, and that's what I'm saying. What I don't think changes, unless there are a couple of personality alterations between now and the deadline, and maybe a reset in these guys' brains is that this team becomes a physical team with pushback that's ready to take any motherfuckers on at any time. I don't think that changes. Mike, a few more points and we'll get out of here.
Short of, and okay, and I'm, believe me, folks, I'm not one of the, I'm not rooting for this, and I think probably most Leaf fans are not rooting for this. But short of a significant injury to one of those teams, like if Vasilevsky went down going into the playoffs, or if Bergeron or Marchand or Pasternak got hurt, I don't see a path where the Leafs, you could say, well, the Leafs went to 7 games with the Bruins.
Forget the 7 games, man.
They went
ended in 6.
and they went to 7 games with Tampa. Great, but
Close it in 6 again.
Right, but if you get to game 7, if you get to game 7, the cream rises to the top. I mean, you could say Vasilevsky struggled in that playoff series last year, but Vasilevsky in game 6 and game 7, he was the difference. He was the difference. So I'm just saying, it's like, if those teams, and we know that the injuries happen and whatever, but I don't think you can depend on all of a sudden Boston or Tampa in the playoffs just saying, oh, they will come with their hair on fire.
Yeah,
they will be there.
Right, that's the thing.
And Toronto has to match that to be able to beat that, because I think Toronto, talent-wise, is as talented, or maybe even more talented offensively, than Tampa or Boston. But Boston and Tampa are more complete teams and play a playoff style, and Toronto doesn't.
Can I ask you a question? What kinds of conversations do you think Sheldon Keefe has with Kyle Dubas when they're sitting around having a scotch? Like, Sheldon Keefe can't think that team that he's got right now is good enough to go all the way. I mean, it's close, but being close like this, almost, and not being able to and being close like this, but having a just a philosophy on the team and guys on the team who can't themselves elevate and get there and just be augmented and put over the edge. That's got to be more frustrating than being a year, several years back, knowing that you can create what you need to create to get there. What kinds of conversations do you think these guys have, and what do you think Sheldon Keefe is begging Kyle Dubas to do for him, if he is at all?
Well, I mean, I think, and of course it was highly edited, so we didn't get a clear indication of what those conversations are like. But with that Amazon series, you did see some conversations between the two. And I do think, I don't think that Sheldon Keefe is like in lockstep with everything that Kyle Dubas does. But basically, it's like Kyle Dubas provides the talent, and Sheldon Keefe does his best to make that team into a more cohesive unit against the opposition that they face. And I definitely think that this team over the last few years since Keefe took over is much better defensively as a team unit. I mean,
and that's important. That's really important. And nobody's shitting on the defensive style that they adopted, employed, and wouldn't say perfected, but really got good at when Riley was gone. And just to limited what Austin Matthews and some of these offensive guys can do. That's why their point totals are down. But the goals against had been down. It's starting to creep up a little bit now. I think that defensive way of thinking is extremely important. But what do you need when you're playing more defensively? You still need to have guys who, one, block in defensively, but also lock into a physical mindset, and to take the play when they get the opportunity. I don't think throughout this group these guys are on board with that. I don't think they're capable of that. And I believe Sheldon Keefe, that deep down, that's really got to bug him, because I think he knows what he needs, and I don't think it's just as easy as snapping your fingers, picking up a phone, and acquiring a guy to change.
But I also think that, we were concerned last week when we were talking on the convo about the performance of Murray and Samsonov, and this week Murray was fantastic against Nashville. Samsonov was great against Detroit in a losing effort, and I thought Murray was pretty good tonight good enough to win the game. He
Yeah.
made saves at the key times. So I don't think the goaltending is a question mark. Here's the one optimistic or one of the few optimistic things that I saw from the game last night. Sandin and Liljegren are a pairing that not to be feared, but they move the puck. They know each other. Liljegren is a lot more physical than a lot of people give credit for. He's tough against the boards. And that is okay. If you're going to hang something in terms of a positive for Kyle Dubas, what they've done in terms of talent recognition. Liljegren was drafted by Mark Hunter, but he was developed through the organization slowly through the Toronto Marlies, and now after being drafted in 2017, it's 2023, and I think he's arguably one of their better defenders. Sandin has had injury issues. He played really well last night. Giordano at $800,000 could be one of the best bargains in the league. When Riley gets back up to speed, and he has half a season to do it, Brody gets back healthy, I think their defense is good enough to win in the playoffs. Where I think are going to need help is the depth up front.
Yeah.
You cannot have a fourth line with Wayne Simmons and Dryden Hunt playing 8 minutes and 5 minutes in a playoff scenario. You need a fourth line that is not a liability, that can play 10 to 12 minutes. And if you don't have that, you're not going to win. You cannot do it. You cannot lump 24, 25, 26 minutes a night on your top forwards. You need to have depth throughout the lineup and people contributing. And last night, I think you basically played a game with 10 forwards.
Sandin and Liljegren look great, and they obviously, the optics were benefited them because the other guys, Timmins and Riley, played so ineffectively. We've been lauding Timmins over his point production. That's great and all, Connor, but we need you to play with size and be physical and be defensive. Everyone's gonna have a shitty game, and a guy like Connor Timmins, he's gonna have a shitty game. He's just so young, and you go on a run, and then the reality sets in that this is hard, and you're gonna have challenges. The Riley thing is tough. He's not gonna get the rope that you or I think he should get because he's put in all the time and he's been relatively stable coming off of an injury. It's just, no, that's not the way it is. We all look for somebody to whip on and shit on. And Riley right now, if his play continues this way, or he doesn't show signs of snapping out of it and getting back to the old Morgan Riley, it's going to get worse. But Liljegren, what I do like about him is that there's no entitlement, right? They took their time with him, and that was part of the understanding. We didn't really hear that Timothy Liljegren wants to fuck off back to Sweden because he thinks he's the second coming of Nick Lidstrom, and the Leafs are suppressing his ability. This guy he's here, and he's got his eyes, man. You see it in his eyes, man. That guy's got those serial killer eyes. Like, I'm not playing games out here. And 4 hits last night, and whether they're just if he's just a paper tiger, that's one thing. I really, really like that. I like the way he plays. I'm encouraged about that, and I'm glad you brought that up. Our buddy Veets giving a shout out to his fellow Paisan, not you, but to Mark Giordano, a guy who almost 40 years of age, blocking shots and doing a lot of stuff that is nice to see, but man, oh man, like, he's on borrowed time. You'd like to have him not necessarily convalesce, but play a bit more of a support role. But then again, maybe it's in him to play as hard as he possibly can, as long as he can. And we're not complaining as Leaf fans. We got to wrap it up here, Mike. I'm pointing to, and let's go.
Yeah, I had somebody say to me, "Gee, I wish we would have had Giordano 10 years ago." It's like,
sure, who wouldn't have?
Yeah, exactly. Just the one point I saw Corey Parrish in the chat about Nyes, and somebody previous to that says, "Well, Nyes doesn't want to be with the Leafs." Okay, I was at the rookie development camp in last summer. Matthew Nyes did not sign with the Leafs, not because he didn't want to sign with the Leafs, but because he didn't think he was ready to jump in and to be in a playoff scenario.
That's ridiculous.
Every indication is that Matthew Nyes will sign with the Leafs after his season at Minnesota is over with. Now, the thing is that Minnesota more than likely is going to go to the Frozen Four. They're one of the best teams in the NCAA right now. They have Logan Cooley, who was first round pick of the Arizona Coyotes. He's playing on Nyes' line. Nyes I retweeted it. He had a fantastic shorthanded goal for Minnesota in a recent.
I'd want that experience too if I were him.
Right, exactly. So I think, he's going to play in the Frozen Four, and then I think he will sign with the Leafs. Now, where I think it's unfair is I don't think the Leafs are going to say, "Oh, okay, Matthew Nyes, with one game experience, let's put you in on the second line with Tavares and Marner." I mean, he's a kid coming out of college hockey.
He's Brendan Shanahan. That's who he is. He's reincarnated.
Chris Kreider or somebody. No, yeah. if you want to put him in on the fourth line, okay. If you think he can handle it, sure. But I'm just saying, they're not going to leave a spot in the top six for Matthew Nyes in a playoff scenario against a Tampa Bay or Boston. It's just not fair. That's why the Leafs have to go out and do something at the deadline and improve this team in a dramatic fashion if they think they have a chance to beat the Lightning or the Bruins.
OG's Converse, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We teased you with a potential show, a sneak show for Friday. Mike was at the Marlies game, and I don't know.
That was an eventful game because after the first period, unfortunately someone in the stands had a cardiac event or some health event. They had to call EMS in, and that person was taken out of the arena by ambulance, and they couldn't continue the game because they have to have an ambulance on standby, apparently, per league rules. So the game ended up getting postponed. So I was only able to see one period of Marlies hockey, and that hopefully the person who had the medical emergency is okay. I haven't heard anything in terms of what happened, but it was sort of an eventful game.
Did you go through that bullshit trip on the GO train too, just to get there for one period?
Yeah.
Oh fuck.
Yeah, but hey,
worst. But at least you got back to Aldershot or wherever you dumped your car early enough to avoid the lunatics who were on that last train.
Yeah, no, Burlington. I never go to Aldershot.
Wow, Veets, have a great week, Norm and Mike. You too, Veets. Bitch Marner. What are you drinking, Norm? Wouldn't you like to know? Maybe I'll share that with you. The Panthers, interesting. I'm sorry, we should go, but I'm just thinking about the Panthers. President's Trophy winners in Sunrise, Florida. All 12 fans down there were pretty indifferent to it. And here they are struggling to, be relevant and make the playoffs. So, as we get frustrated that the Leafs don't seem to be able to take that next leap in terms of the full mosaic of becoming not a contender, but a champion. We look at a team like the Panthers that rose and they're doing their very best not to fall completely flat. These aren't terrible times in Toronto. These are really good times, but good is not enough.
No. And last word for me, right now the Leafs are 26-11-7. They played 44 games. Good. Tampa's played 41. Tampa's only 4 points behind the Leafs. So it's going to be a nip and tuck battle for home ice advantage. I don't know how much that means, but 6 of the next 7 games before the All-Star break, the Leafs play at 7 of the next 8, they play at Scotiabank Arena. So that is where they need to make hay against Tampa. They play Florida and Winnipeg at home, and then Montreal on Saturday night at Centre Bell, as you say. And this is where, and it's a balanced schedule. No 3 games in 4 nights. It's every other night from here until the All-Star break. They need to make hay and earn some points.
And it all comes down to, just like you said, earning points, staying on track, and doing what it can as a team to internally get better, find that extra gear inside, and collectively show the organization and the fans that we are we aren't as far away as many of us believe from actually reaching the promised land, that it's generally within that group. Perhaps some reinforcements will be added before the playoffs come, and it would be nice, Mike, for once to be doing a show or a series of show after a first round victory. We haven't been able to do that as the collaboration of the Leafs Convo since we got going back in 2018. Will it happen? later on in the spring? It remains to be seen, but all of you guys I know will stay tuned to the Leafs Combo. Like this content, subscribe to the channel, let your friends know what we're doing. In all likelihood, you'll see us in 7 days' time, but you never know when we'll be able to come together and put something to wax for you and get you set up for whatever's going on with the Maple Leafs. For Mike, I'm Norm. Talk to you soon.